This is going to be an unpopular response, but I believe it is an appropriate response. All we have to do is at least look at 60 years of the past 60 years and compare what I'm going to say to where we are. And if people were to really sit down and be honest, you would at least admit that I'm right with respect to that. It's the breakdown of the family.
All right, guys, we are back, and I know you guys are excited and enjoying my interview with speaker, coach, scholar, author, and more, Stephen Boyd. He is our guest on the Thanksgiving edition of the Thinking Out Loud radio show. So happy to have him on. We've been talking about his experiences in the first segment as a educator and administrator in schools, and what inspired him to teach our young people, given the challenges that they face in urban America. And I admire all of our teachers. Let me just say that on the record, for those who are listening, those who are even watching us on our YouTube channel, we admire all of our teachers, because it takes a special kind of person to be able to go into work and to deal with the challenges that they face every single day, and to continue to be motivated, to continue to be inspired to do the work that is necessary for our young people to be successful. And so our hat is off to you and to everyone like you. And so I want to start off, though, Stephen, with you giving us some examples of the messages that you share with both teachers and students to keep them engaged and inspired, both to teach and to be taught.
I'm going to hearken to the example I shared in the first part before the commercial break, where I was talking to you about the young student that was really having a difficult time as a result of kind of being consequence. And she felt you said something to this person and you didn't say anything to them, but you said something to me. And of course, this apparently has been a pattern with feeling as though I'm always targeted. And then when it's two people, I'm always being talked to. I shared this story with her as relates to that. And I think it was part of the breakthrough with respect to that conversation. Apparently, in around the turn of the century into the 20th century, in some part of England or Europe, they would experiment with prisoners that had been incarcerated for some time. And they would do this test. And this test would be to put them in this room and turn on a faucet and let the faucet run, and then give them a mop and observe what they would do. And what they decided was, if the prisoner went in with the mop and was just mopping and mopping, not knowing that they were supposed to go and actually turn off the faucet, then that was a conclusion that prisoner was not ready to actually enter back into society. But if the prisoner had the wherewithal to go in, notice that the faucet was running, turn it off, and then commence mopping, to them, that was a test, a past test, that they were ready to enter back into society. And one of the things I shared with her is I shared this little story with her. And I said to this child, I said, we're doing a lot of different things and we got a lot of mops in our hands. I have a feeling that this faucet is running and we can't figure out how to turn it off unless you're really honest with us. Not long after that, as we kept asking, that's when we really began to hear the honesty about this abandonment from the mother and the abandonment of other people. And the reason why they respond the way they do when they feel like they have been done unjustly. And once we got to that, that seemed to be, okay, now we'll start to turn off the faucet. Because before it was, we're going to try to mop therapy. We're going to try to mop with this. We're going to refer for this. We're going to give this a try. We just kept mopping. And so when I talk about the messages, that particular message resonated with me this week is because that is really what's happening inside our society today. Right? We have these deep-seated issues, but nobody's turning off the faucet. We keep actually trying to legislate another mop, and try another program and this, and all of these things are good. But when the deep-seated issue is we need to go and turn off the faucet, we're not stopping flooding. And so with respect to the message, in addition to some of the other messages that I shared before, put your game face on, which is also a message for students and also a message for teachers. I'm really excited to share that message in different parts. And if anybody's interested, principal or superintendent is interested in us sharing that message, I'm certainly willing to share that message. But I think at my core, what I'm really beginning to discover is until we can determine how to turn off the faucet, we can keep mopping and mopping, but we're not going to stop the bleeding. We're not going to stop the heartbreak. We're going to stop the disappointment, or in this case, the abandonment with respect to helping move students, helping move teachers from, a place of brokenness to a place of healing. One of the things that we're really going to talk about with respect to our Contagious Teaching Conference next year, again, we're still in the planning stages, is inviting some therapists and some social workers to this conference to provide teachers who register an opportunity for having about 30 to 40 minutes to just meet with a therapist and just unload. So there's a mental health strand that we're really talking about that will make our conference a little bit different, because we want them to come not just to get great content, but here's an opportunity for you to address your own mental health. That would be another message that I would probably want to put out there to teachers, that you can't be, and that's actually part of my game face message. One of of course, I always like to talk acronyms. So there's the G that means something, the A that means something, the M of game face means make self-care a priority. They said that the teaching profession is 40% more stressful than being a farmer, than working in a retail establishment, and some other ones that actually have high stress jobs. And so teachers have a lot of stress. And while we have great benefits and other things like that, one of the things we thought would be very special as a part of this conference is to have some other counselors that are going to be a part of partners that would just make themselves available for a teacher to come talk in a very closed setting, outside of the conference, and just talk about whatever. If they want some other services thereafter, they can continue to have those services. The point I'm making is I fly a lot. When you get to that point where the stewardess is showing you all the safety protocols, the one thing that I always pay attention to, and I think people know where I'm going with this, is if you ever have to depart the plane, or the plane is losing oxygen and the oxygen mask deflates and you have a small child with you, what do they always say to you? Before you put the oxygen mask on the child, first put it on yourself. And I think a lot of teachers, the reason why that they cannot teach effectively, or they're struggling, is nobody's helping them put on their own oxygen mask. And so the acknowledgement fact that, yeah, we have mental health with our kids. It's been exacerbated by the pandemic. We have more kids that are on all kinds of medications like never before. My wife works as a elementary school nurse, and she tells me a lot of stories about giving these kids medications. And my mother was a nurse, and so she came along when the whole Ritalin and Adderall boom was really big in the late 80s and the 2000s. And so there is definitely an acknowledgement of mental health with the youth, but what about the teachers? What about the impact that these students are coming with baggage are dumping it on the teachers, and teachers may not have the efficacy or the wherewithal to have their own self-care to be able to dump it out. And I think all of us at some point have been at that space where we just felt like, you know what, I'm just walking away from it all. And I think that's the first step to really becoming healed, is we can acknowledge that we have problems. But specifically with teachers, being able to share a message with them to say, listen, we understand that you're going through a lot, and we want to create a forum where you can have your own mental health addressed. That's another thing I think that would be very helpful, similar to helping them turn off the faucet and get them mopping, so we can clean some of the things that's going on with them, helping them clean up as well.
That is a powerful message. I cannot overemphasize how powerful that was, because what's the message? I'm thinking of a phrase that I've heard many times: physician, heal thyself. And because the teacher is in the position to teach, and that is an outward occupation, that is an outward expression, and that's an outward action. In order to do that, much of the focus is on the output, and it's on the individual that's being taught. And instead of us now being able to turn the attention back onto the teacher themselves, the ones that are doing the teaching, because it starts with them. And if there's a problem with them, and particularly if it's related to their mental health, that's definitely something that needs to be addressed. And I don't know if if that is if that's something that has been a part of the larger conversation when it comes to teaching, because teachers have to do so much. They have to wear so many different hats. And that's why their jobs are so stressful, because in addition to being a teacher, you have to be a counselor. And sometimes you have to be a surrogate mother or a surrogate parent or father in some instances to these young people. And that is not a comfortable position for some teachers to be in. So that's what again makes that position very stressful. And yes, I totally agree that adding that component as a part of your contagious teaching conference would be a tremendous benefit to those in this profession, that would encourage them to, okay, yeah, now somebody is actually concerned about my well-being, because most of my profession is about the well-being of others. Exactly. But now someone is actually taking the time to see what I'm going through and to see what I'm experiencing, so that I can help someone else. And lastly, that's a great analogy that you use on the plane when the stewardess says he do run into any turbulence, or is we have to have an emergency landing and the oxygen mask come down. Practical thinking would say, okay, you would address the person that's in need of the help first. But no, you want to be able, in order for you to be able to help someone else, you've got to put the mask on first.
Yeah.
And because the oxygen is just as important to you as it is to that other person. And,
That's right.
Right. So if you're going to be able to continue living, you got to put that oxygen mask on first. And it's not a selfish perspective. This is not a selfish perspective or outlook that we're taking or emphasizing, but it's really just putting the focus on where it should be. And that is on the person first. Once you address yourself first, then you're able to help someone else. And that's an awesome component. And I'm sure that that's going to be a beneficial part of your conference if you're able to add that to it.
Yes, sir. And the cool thing about it is we've been in conversations with one of the local universities that we're considering as the venue. We've made a relationship with a person who is not the dean of the counseling department, but I think works under the dean and teaches some classes. And when we shared this vision, was so impacted by it. Well, we actually had a follow-up conversation, had already had a conversation with the department and with other providers in the local area as potential sponsors. Because again, we shared how our target market is those teachers of 5 years or less. So we're looking at, again, those teachers who are pretty much new, with the goal of helping school districts retain those teachers as relates to, as a part of our marketing strategy in providing that support and giving them the opportunity to say, hey, this is what we think we want to do differently with our conference. Just to say, hey, we'll find a space. Everyone will have these little cubby holes. What I envision is like little couches and little barriers and borders throughout, and they can have an opportunity to just meet with somebody for 30 minutes. And then they have all kinds of ways they can follow up and do some sessions with those teachers thereafter. So we're really excited about the potential for that opportunity to help with that self-care piece.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Guys, I know you are enjoying my interview with this educator, coach, and speaker, Stephen Boyd, on the Thanksgiving edition of the Thinking Out Loud radio show. Again, if you're listening to the podcast, be sure and subscribe. If you're watching us on YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe button and that bell notification. Every time a new episode drops, you'll be the first one that is notified. And again, I'm so happy to have this gentleman on the podcast with us this week. He's sharing with us some golden nuggets that I hope you are enjoying and appreciate. In addition to him being an educator, an administrator, a coach, He is also an author of 3 books. And I want you to share with our listeners about your 3 books. And they sound like they are very powerful books. The first one is Your Deck of Success and Divine Blueprint. And the third is Heal the Land, a blueprint for spiritual restoration. We want you to share with our listeners more about these books and the purpose and objective of each of them.
The first 2 books, Your Divine Blueprint and Your Deck of Success, I was privileged through our mutual friend, Pam Perry, to be selected along with
Shout out to them both, Hark and Dr. Pam.
Pam Perry PR, to be selected along with other authors to be a part of a compilation book with some other major authors, Michelle Mars, Dr. Ken Smiley, both very prominent national figures. And so to be selected to be a part of that book was Your Deck of Success was the first book. And the impetus behind that book was really all about what is your secret sauce, and what would you say to entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs, about how to be successful as an entrepreneur. And I like the metaphor with respect to the Deck of Success, because there was 52 of us from across the country. For those that actually get a chance to find that book on Amazon, I am the 8 of spades in the book, by the way. And mine had to do with prayer and as an entrepreneur, putting prayer at the center, being reflective, and some action planning. So those are some of the things that my contribution to that book. And so Your Deck of Success was really just all about what would be your wisdom to other aspiring entrepreneurs. And so now Divine Blueprint was a different publisher, but the same author that was in Deck of Success wanted to take a little step further and talk about the partnership between your faith journey and your entrepreneurial journey. And so Divine Blueprint came out this year, in April this year. And again, people can find it on Amazon. And so in my contribution towards that book, it was 17 authors from across the country. And my chapter had to do with what I call the 3Ds, the 3Ds of destiny. What my take on it as relates to Divine Blueprint, what was my Divine Blueprint? My message was very simple, that in order to get you to destiny, that place where you're really walking in your purpose and you're walking in your flow, if you will, God is going to take you through 3 phases of your life. He's going to take you through disappointment, delays, and detours. And I talked about just the natural order of those things. And I use different characters in the Bible to accentuate my point as relates to how every single one of them became great biblical characters, giants that we're still talking about today. But you have to appreciate what they went through before they ever got to the place where we are celebrating them today. I talk about David. I talk about Joseph. All 3 of them each went through delays or disappointments or detours. And one of the things that I want to just communicate to your audience is I believe everybody has a divine destiny, a divine blueprint. But my contribution to the book was to awaken people to the understanding that your destiny, your apex, your flow, the place when you get there, it's just not going to be a snap overnight. You're just not going to arrive. You're going to go through some delays. You're going to go through some detours, and you're going to go through some disappointment. And if you can embrace that as a part of the journey and not get mad at the journey, it's going to cause you to, when you get there, you're going to have substance. You're going to have weight. You're going to have a sense of calling, if you will, not just I kind of arrive and I'm here and I finally made it. It's all about me. No, it's going to be like I'm here to give back to people. I'm here to share with people. I'm here to connect with people that have gone through the same struggle. I'm convinced that people really want to connect with your struggle and want to sense that, oh, this person has been through the same thing I had. So Divine Blueprint was all about that. And finally, your Heal the Land was an extension of songs I wrote in 2020 called Heal the Land. It really was a clarion call during the 47th president of the United States. At that time was 45th. It was making some very unwise political moves and decisions that was putting our country really at the brink at that time of what could have been World War III. And so I was sitting at a stoplight and I just said, God, we need you to heal the land. And birthed this song. And then a couple of years later, when I was working with a marketing company for the music, they really loved the song, although it was about 2 years later and wanted to push song again. And so it inspired me to go ahead and finish the book because I was actually working on the book and I just was difficult to do both at the same time. So Heal the Land, a blueprint to spiritual restoration, was really all about communicating that God has given us a formula based on 2 Chronicles 7:14, which says, if my people to call by my name would humble themselves and pray, seek my face, turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven, forgive the sins, and heal the land. And so I have what I call the revival matrix. And it's a basically training where I go through what it means to humble yourself, pray, seek your face, and turn from. I have a framework that I've designed that I share as a part of a workshop to just walk through what I call the steps to revival based on that text, and then showing different examples in the scripture where many people who saw a spiritual awakening went through those same steps. And if we as America, as the world, feel like God has abandoned us, God is not doing this, how could God do that? Here's the thing. If we follow the blueprint, then we'll see an awakening like never before. We got to humble ourselves. What does it mean to do that? We got to pray. What are the different types of prayers, different ways we pray? We got to seek his face. What does that mean? And turn from our wicked ways. And yes, even as an educator, I'm also spiritual. I'm also faith-based. I'm also a minister. And so that was really my gift to the world, to shout a clarion call, to blow the trumpet in Zion, according to Joel chapter 2, to sound an alarm. And so I'm really excited about that. And so if there's any faith-based persons that are listening to this and are interested in just having me teach on the revival matrix, the revival framework, would just love to. It's a workshop opportunity to just guide your people, your leaders, your congregation through the elements of that, and then have an opportunity to really engage in an opportunity to ask God to send a revival.
That's awesome. That is absolutely awesome. Those books, I'm sure, are.
Michael, I will put a plug in here. So because I really do a lot in the K-12 space, we are working on the Contagious Teaching book and some companion workbooks for 2025. So with respect to the K-12 brand specifically, we are working on that. And the goal is, hopefully, if we're able to finish, the book will be ready by the time we are ready to launch the conference in 2025. So for your listeners, just look for us to have our Contagious Teaching book and some other things that are in alignment with our brand, because our brand is specializing in classroom management and student engagement training. And so we will be releasing our K-12 book called Contagious Teaching. We're still talking through the titles right now, but we know it's going to be Contagious Teaching, which is one of our most popular trainings that people are contracting to train.
That is awesome. That is awesome, guys. I know you are enjoying my interview with educator, coach, speaker, scholar, and author Stephen Boyd. He is our guest on the Thanksgiving edition of the Thinking Out Loud radio show. And all of those books, I'm sure, are going to be a blessing to you. Make sure you go and pick them up, because they really appear to be books that are going to help you improve yourself. Those are books that I'm interested in material that's going to help me be a better person, help me to see myself in my life from a better perspective and a better vantage point. Speaking as an author myself, I've written a couple books, and the books that I've written, both books are faith-based books as well. Who Told You That You Were Naked is a book.
Yeah.
The Garden of Eden.
The Garden of Eden.
Adam is walking through the garden and he hears God's voice in the cool of the day, and he hides himself because he's naked, and God asks him,
who told you were naked? Come on then.
And so we delve into that. That book is about spiritual identity and how it was lost in the Garden of Eden, and how we can regain that spiritual identity in Jesus Christ. And then our second book is called Vision. And I think, as you were talking about, your book, is it the Divine Blueprint?
Yeah.
It reminds me of that book, because in our book, we talk about seeing ourselves through God's eyes, because for many of us, we're looking in the mirror and we're seeing ourselves the way we see us, or the way we want to be seen. But if you really want to be successful, you have to see yourself the way God sees you. and his vision for your life is the best way to see yourself. And it takes a spiritually grounded person to be able to do that, because that vision comes with sacrifice. It comes being able to set aside your goals, your aspirations, your ambitions, because many of them are not aligned with what God has for your life. And so in order to really to see yourself the way God sees you, have to submit yourself to live according to his word and his will. But yeah, I think there's some commonality.
Yeah, yeah. I said some connection, some commonality, and some camaraderie.
Absolutely, for one minister to another.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I again appreciate you being our guest on this week's edition of the Thinking Out Loud radio show. And our last question as we get ready to close this particular segment, for someone that works with our young people on a regular basis, both men and women, young boys and young girls, what do you see as their biggest obstacle or challenge growing up in urban America?
This is going to be an unpopular response, but I believe it is an appropriate response. All we have to do is at least look at 60 years of the past 60 years and compare what I'm going to say to where we are. And if people were to really sit down and be honest, you would at least admit that I'm right with respect to that. It's the breakdown of the family. It's the breakdown of the family.
Absolutely.
And if whether that is rural America, urban America, suburban America, the breakdown of the family was the foundation of the educational system. If you were to compare even a child in 2024 and look at those that come from either a stable family as it relates to a two-parent household, or even if it's a single parent that has a strong community wrapped around that child's ability to navigate and adjust into a school environment and perform well is going to, in most cases, and I can't really articulate statistics right now, but comparatively, what I've seen over the past almost 30 years is those that come from two-parent homes, two incomes, two parents, and whether that's a loving community with grandparents, other people around, tend to do far better than those that come from single-parent homes. The unfortunate thing is when you look at history, particularly in the Black community, in order to destabilize the civil rights movement, the quote-unquote powers that be got smart and said, hey, if we begin to ship these manufacturing jobs overseas, we can destabilize the economy. Where were most of these people living? They were living in urban America by far, by definition, was not what we see today and what we've seen over the past maybe 50 years. We go back to maybe the 70s when we really started to see a strong destabilization. Urban America in the 40s and 50s and 60s was an urban America where people were moving from the South. And I'm talking specifically about my people. The Great Migration from the 1800s to about the 1920s, because they were coming out of the sharecropping opportunities and the inequities of pay. And the men were packing up their families and moving to these shirt factories and pickle factories and potato plants and shirt plants and shoe plants and manufacturing plants where they could have a higher wage and hopefully do better for their families. And of course, those are the same that were economic engines for the civil rights movement, McCain, Stokely Carmichael, all those people that were fighting for civil rights through the Southern Christian Leadership Organization. So when we look at the destabilization of that from like Gerald Ford and then Eisenhower and then some of the other presidents that would begin to replace what was supposed to be in the family with these social programs. Now these social programs replace the stability of the family. All that to say, what is the biggest obstacle right now is not really having this parental support that teachers need to really do a fabulous job. Do we make it happen? Yes. But it's hard when you change 5 cell phones. It's hard when you have different addresses. It's hard when you have a mother that's working 2 jobs, gets off at one at 4, got to go to the other one at 5. and you have a child who's home, an older child that's taking care of a younger child, and then that same mother's got a boyfriend that she thinks she can trust, and the boyfriend is doing something crazy. And I know this is unpopular talk, but I just have to keep it a little raw because this is really what I see. So when you have these dynamics, now that's happening generationally over and over and it's passed down generation to generation, these become the biggest obstacles to academic achievement because the kids have to fight through all this social emotional garbage just to be present for them to learn, just to be present to learn. Now, we also have the emergence of technology, cell phones and other things like that is a barrier as well. And I know different school districts are experimenting with policies as to get rid of cell phones, keeping them at home. I mean, the cell phone debate has really almost now 15 to 20 years, and it's not gotten any better. So comparatively, we know that kids on the cell phones, unless the teacher knows how to use technology and leverage it in a learning way that maximizes learning, it really becomes an impediment. But by far, the biggest thing is really the breakdown of the family, and specifically that Black family in particular. And I know that is a very unpopular soundbite in 2024, but to be honest, all you have to do is look at the numbers, go back to 1940, go back to 1950, compare it to where we are today. When you see a mother and father and 3 kids in 1940, 1950, 1960, now you got a mom with 4 kids by 3 different dads. But we still have to educate them. I get it. We still got to educate them. But at the root of it, the family was the foundation for the academic success of the students in the school.
And I cannot argue with anything that you said. In fact, at this juncture, I'm going to invite our listeners and viewers to drop comments wherever you are listening and even watching this particular podcast, to chime in and let us know what you think. If in fact, Stephen Boyd and myself are correct, in fact, that in saying that the challenges facing our Black young men and women in urban America in 2024 is the breakdown of the Black family and how it has impacted the teachers who have to teach those young men and young women, young boys and young girls in our public schools and charter schools and schools across this country. And I'm sure they will agree. And so we want to hear from you. Drop those thoughts in the comments because it is interesting that this is the reality. And whether we want to accept it or not, this is he is a truth teller. He's not telling a lie about any of it. And I think we need more. You need to hear the truth of what's going on because we're past the point of sugarcoating things and sugarcoating our problems in an effort to just get by. Because as we said earlier in the podcast, mental health is a big part of this, and self-care is a big part of this, and being able to really address those issues head on, I think will be a benefit to everyone as who's a part of this conversation. So yeah, make sure you drop it in the comments because we would love to know what your thoughts are about that. Guys, we're getting ready to take our last break. I know you're enjoying my interview with this educator, this coach, motivational speaker, and more, Stephen Boyd. He is with us on the Thanksgiving edition of the Thinking Out Loud radio show. We're going to take a break and we'll be right back. Stay tuned.